Hello, namaste. I see we have more participants than not only interns from OP Jindal Global University here today. Thank you so much, Dr. Ghosh, for this initiative. It's really great. We truly believe that this would add a lot of understanding for our interns and also all others who would like to know and understand better about Ukraine and also about bilateral Ukrainian-Indian relationship. Dr. Ghosh is the professor of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy of International Relations and also the director of Eastern European Development Institute. So we are conducting this lecture for you today. From Eastern European Development Institute. I would like to you already know, guys, Dr. Alexander Polishchuk, Ambassador of Ukraine. I would just give him a word, please, Ambassador. The floor is yours. You can welcome the participants, and then further we will move to Dr. Ghosh and further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Volodymyr. Namaste. Good morning, good afternoon for everybody who join us for this lecture, and my special thanks for the Professor Ghosh for your initiative to have such series of lecture about the Ukraine relationship between India and Ukraine. And today's topic is very important for us because we will speak and listen about the democracy and society. And I would like to thank Maria Tomak for her readiness to conduct this lecture. Nowadays, as everybody knows, it's very difficult time in Ukraine because we are fighting for our independence, for sovereignty, like the India did it quite a long time ago. But the democracy should be defended. It's because in the current condition, it's only one way which actually we see in Ukraine as our future to develop the democracy, to join the European Union and NATO, which is actually the collaboration of the democratic countries, one of the biggest society in the world. In total, it's 2.5 billion people who live in on a democracy flags, I should say, around the world. So this series of lecture, it's I hope that we will continue in the future because we have the very deep historical roots and the very big tie actually between India and Ukraine. Unfortunately, in some cases, in India especially, the people actually making the similarity between the Soviet Union and Russia, current Russia, which is not actually the truth. And I hope that with this course of lectures, you will definitely have the clear picture. But I hope that we actually will try to explain you with the Ukrainian lectures what actually what Ukraine matter for India. And at the same time, I think that we will touch as well why India is a matter for Ukraine. So with that, I would like just to give the floor to the Professor Mridula Ghosh, and thank you so much that you actually find the time and for your initiative again. And good luck.
Okay, Dr. Ghosh, thank you so much, Ambassador. Dr. Ghosh, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Volodymyr. Thank you, Your Excellency, for the introduction and for the beginning. I'm very happy to see everyone present today, and the primary purpose of today is my short introduction of talking about Ukraine, which, everyone is very much worried about every day we see on the newspapers. And I have students here from both sides, from the Indian side who are undergoing training, and they are having some trainingship in the embassy, as well as students who have studied in the Cave Mohila Academy and have been from the first course to the second course and also graduated, as well as experts, as well as other friends of the EEDI are here. So I'm very happy to welcome all of them. I would start my presentation with with a very short, if you do you see do you see my presentation? You don't, right?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, just a second. Is it visible now?
Yes, it is.
All right. So we will have a series of 4 or 5 lectures, and today is the first one, which is an introduction. And this is undertaken under the project Ukraine and South Asia Open Dialogues 2.0. Why 2.0? Because it's the second phase of the project. We had one phase of the project which started in 2024, and we are continuing. We're very happy that the International Renaissance Foundation continues to support us, and a lot of activities are planned for this year. I would like to ask you, what are the words that remind you when you think of Ukraine, if I may, especially for the Indians, the Indian students? What are the words that come the moment you think of the word or the concept Ukraine? Can you write on the chat? Okay, or you can just switch on your microphone and say. Nobody has written. Are you able to write? What words do you remember when you think of India and Ukraine? Aryan Gupta, maybe. Then we have, I'm asking, yeah, democracy. Okay, one is democracy. Another? Anyone else? Okay, the gas and oil deal between solidarity, democracy, gas and oil deal. Anything else? Solidarity again. I would like to hear Prarav Set, please, if you may. For everyone, and food, fertilizers, and okay, agriculture, sunflower seeds. Well, a lot of things. Okay, now let me continue, which is that, I have this, as soon as, we think of Ukraine, these are all the words that can come up, historically when you think of, and also today. So you can see the enormous number of words, which some of which you have said. Freedom, I don't think you have democracy, but you have East Europe, you have war, you have all the other words. You try to find out if the word you thought of is inside this. If not, I'm very happy I will include them. And this is the word cloud. That includes a lot of words which, a student can come across when the person is thinking of Ukraine, historically, geographically, as well as culturally and politically. Now, I would like today to talk about certain myths that are associated with Ukraine and which is very misleading. Our understanding of Ukraine is based on these myths that are circulated in the world. My Ukrainian friends and Ukrainian students, you are all knowing about it, but please bear with me because I will just go through these myths and one by one we will try to see how relevant they are today. And they are all imperial myths that are existing, and these are the 9 ones that we could say. There are many more, but in general, these are the things that are circulated, and in the media, we always hear about them. If we remember 2014, 10 years from now, you were younger, but you must be remembering that everything started with, in the span of your lives, young lives, that Crimea. Everything started with the word Crimea came again and again. Whose Crimea? It was always Russia's. And this was the dictum that was professed all over to prove that, this is legitimate. Russia occupied Crimea, and this is what it started with. Actually, I'm referring to the media, the overall resonance of the word Ukraine, how we came to know about it from 2014. It happened before that, but basically, the war started and it was attacked. It was, Ukraine didn't fire a single bullet, but Crimea was occupied. It was always Russia's. This is the first myth that we have to confront. Now, I would say that Crimea is as much Russia's as Britain has India, or India belongs to Britain.
Тупая бледота,
Колбачи, обычная порно, не беда, сочные дошкольницы и первоклашки, порно с говном и трупами, а также что заставит тебя
some trolls, I think.
Заходи на сайт 365.ru, тут много сочных детей.
Can everyone please mute your microphones, please? Okay, thank you. I would like to talk about please, whenever you have some undesirable sound, just mute your microphone if it is okay, yeah? So that, everyone can hear me and also I can hear you. Okay. Thank you. Next will be my next point will be that why I told this, that the moment we have everyone is please you mute your microphone.
Just ban these people, it's trolls.
Представляю вашему вниманию новый хит военного времени.
Seems like it's done on purpose.
May I remove this participant, please?
Yes, please. I'm sure it's done on purpose, so it looks like.
I'm removing this participant. Yeah, okay.
Остался один стрим, что ж, придется забирать раскладчик.
Yeah, can I...
Тупая бледота,
Mr. Volodymyr, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
I'm making you the co-host. Yes, I'm making
please,
you
please.
the
I will do that.
co-host.
Yes.
So that, you can remove anyone you find, undesirable.
Sure.
So are you... Okay, just a second. I will make you the co-host. Please. I'm really sorry for this. This is not intended. So just a second. Yes. Are you the co-host now? Are you the co-host now? You can access, right?
I think so. Yes, correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Let us move on. Let us move. Okay, so now in 1783, Catherine II finished her conquest of South Ukraine, including Crimea. Since then, it is like from the mid of the 18th century that, Russia, had Crimea within its fold. And, okay, so, excuse me, yes. Can I make it now, this waiting room, can I make it in the settings now? Do you think? Yes?
Yes, it's in the settings. Like you will see it. It's enable waiting room. In the Zoom near the share, the green button, like it's nearby.
Okay. Enable waiting room, where is that? Advanced?
Зал очікування, depending on the language you use.
Ну, добре, але де це можна просто?
Біля кнопки, оце от Share, там, де от ви демонструєте екран, там буде от налаштування, і там можна поставити, включити зал очікування, або Enable Waiting Room, воно називається.
Зараз. Advanced sharing option, да, оцей?
Ні, не в шері, поруч з кнопкою Share в Zoom.
Host tools.
Так.
Окей, enable waiting room.
Ось, так, все.
Український секс-шоп «Все для Тараса».
Оця от людина Танганіан
шаровар, презервативы с усиками и чубом, пампушки, кляпы, а также массажное масло с ароматом чеснока.
Я думаю, тепер все буде нормально, якщо waiting room.
Так, пане Володимире, ви чуєте мене, так?
Так, чую.
Добре, значить, я вже зробила waiting room.
Оця от Олена ще видавить.
Будь ласка, всі робіть мікрофон mute. Чи можемо зробити мікрофон mute? Всі зробили, да? Добре. Окей. А можете написати, окей, iPhone і Redmi Note, можете написати ім'я, будь ласка, щоб ми знали, хто? Хто такий Олег Waiting Room?
Не впускайте просто, продовжуйте.
I'm not letting anyone enter, okay? Janina Redmi, okay. Добре. This is the first time we are having this kind of disturbances. I'm sorry because we have never, encountered such problems. But anyway, I think this is enough. We are 27 people, excluding me, so we are in sufficient number. So you can understand the issues that are so serious if some person talking makes such a big problem. Yeah. So, Так. Redmi Note 14 Pro 5G. Your name is Janina, so I agree with you. Okay. Now, let me continue. Yes, okay. So, I'm not including anyone, and Mr. Volodymyr, I will request you not to admit anyone else. Okay. So, thank you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It never happened, honestly. This is the first time. Yeah. I'm trying to join from PC. Can you, Rechka Nazar? Okay. This is a person I know. So maybe I will try to.
I admitted him.
Okay. Yeah. Nazar, I know. So you can admit, yeah. Okay. So I'm sorry. Okay. Now, Crimea becomes occupied in 2014, but historically, if we look at the peninsula, you can see historically it was not a place which belonged to Russia. And also in ancient times, by telling that it always was Russian is a misnomer, because it was not classically belonging to Russia as one of the territories like Muscovy or Novgorod or and adjacent areas. So it was something which was a part of the Ottoman Empire. Before that, it was it was the Khazar Khaganate and all that. So it has crossed a lot of different kingdoms and different holdings by different leaders. So Crimea being Russian was only, it happened when it became the after the Soviet Union. Even then, it was until 1954. After the Second World War until 1954, like in between the years from the beginning of the Soviet Union. However, in 54, while Crimea was like an autonomous republic within the Russian Federation, which then existed, it was very unique. It has a very unique weather, unique geographical situation, and also unique ethnic composition. Basically, the very fundamental truth is that the indigenous peoples have inhabited Crimea. The old settlements can trace back to the roots of Greece. And we can see that there was a sizable number of at least three people who were indigenous to Crimea. Crimean Tatars, who are actually called the Kirimli in Crimean Tatar language. And the other two are Krimchak and Karaim. So these are the three groups that are indigenous. Apart from that, it was a home to different other nationalities, including Greeks, Bulgarians, and many others in that peninsula. It was a very different microclimate. It had a very different vegetation. And after Stalin's deportation of these minorities which were residing in Crimea under the plea that they were being collaborators of the German Nazi, they were sent in horrible circumstances to Central Asia. And after that, there was almost, it was empty, because it was almost, 500,000 or more population. Even, during the occupation by Catherine the Great, that was the 18th century, it was very much, not so much a predominant Russian ethnic population. So afterwards, the population structure, demographic structure of Crimea changed. And it was like many Russians were brought in, but there was a huge problem that they did not know how to deal with the Crimean soil and land, and it was absolutely devastated after the deportation from 1944 to 1954. And as a result, the old, historical archives say, and even, one can pick up the basic documents that say that the Khrushchev, the Secretary General of the Soviet Union at that time in 1954, just a year after the death of Stalin, he visited Crimea, and then he was very upset that the whole place was so underdeveloped. It was absolutely like a crushing economy. And they wanted that it is logical for Ukraine to be a part of Crimea. And Ukraine historically was related to Crimea, be it, it was belonging to, whichever powers were there. It was the basic land route, the supplies channels and everything came from Ukraine. Since 54, Ukraine, Soviet Socialist Republic, was the primary entity which invested in Crimea. And as you know, a lot of resources were invested to develop Crimea. And during the Soviet times, Crimea was an integral part of Ukraine from 1954. It was a decision by the then parliament of the both republics, and then the decision was taken. So it was not something that today Putin says that, it is just a kind of, a sack of potatoes which were given from one republic to another republic, which was something very wrong. Crimea occupation set the trigger to this whole process, which has started and which is plaguing us today. Excuse me, I'm not sure who is Oleg, who is in the waiting room. So please, I don't think we need to make anyone enter because I'm not sure who is he. Yeah, so let him write. Okay, so then you can decide whether to make him enter or not. Okay, sorry. The second thing that you will always hear, that even long time back, President Vladimir Putin has been telling about it, is that Ukraine is an artificial state and it has no history of statehood. And sometimes even the joke was that Ukraine was created by Lenin. The issue is a very complicated one. It is not simple. Today, we cannot think of the way the nation states are in the form of the states they were even some 50, 70, or let's say 100 years back. For example, 100 years back, India was a very different place. It had the expression, the geographical expression was there, but as you know, that civilizations also live through history. It's both space and time that shape our history. And so it was spread around different territories. And Ukraine as a concept existed long, long before. The first reminiscences was in Herodotus's history, where it mentions about the Scythians. The Scythians were the primary settlers of these regions and the steppes. So when we think of that, it was having no statehood. And later on, of course, you know, the written history, recorded history, there is the records, the tale of the bygone years, which is called Povest Vremennych Let, which is a very ancient record. And over there, it gets mentioned. But the mention is that, yes, Ukraine was a territory which has, it's a frontier territory. That is how it is mentioned in those old records. And the Kievan Rus, capital of Kievan Rus was Kiev. And it is often, misinterpreted that this is the starting point of Russia. I'm jumping into, the fourth very different myth that is spread, which is very, very strange, because there were kingdoms which were called the Rus. In fact, the word Rus, you will be very surprised to know that this is of Scandinavian origin. It is a Finnish word. The word Rus with an apostrophe is Rus, a soft S, which means oarsman, oar. So from there, it is related to the Vikings, and the people who established these smaller kingdoms were the Ruriks. And the Ruriks were, the first princes was like Eric or Rurik. So they were, these were the title, it was a polynym, and which finally became ascribed a geographical connotation. So therefore, the kingdoms that existed, sometimes even the 2 different or 3 different Rus, they were even infighting each other. So it was a very different composite understanding. We cannot, so right when it started with the, Peter the Great's time, the concept of Russia came in. The word Russia is a Greek derivative from the word Rus. Rus is the ancient word, which is what, like for anyone to speak and trace the origins to Rus is something very, very, it's very misleading. It's very, very conceptually not sustainable. And therefore, this kind of thing that there was no statehood and Ukraine was created by Lenin. Why? Because, everyone understood the black soil, the rich black soil that was on near the steppes, and it is spreading from the valleys. Some valleys of the Volga River also has the black soil. 40% of the world's black soil is situated in today's territory of Ukraine, and it goes past towards the Danube River. Even it goes past towards the Hungary, Romania, and until the coastline of Bulgaria. So this is a vast stretch of territory that has the black soil, and this was a very fertile land. And as you know, when agriculture from the nomadic life was like at the juncture of nomadic life and the settled life. So it was the settler life that gave rise to the agricultural activity, and the agricultural activity was very, very active here. And it became even more after there was this, the colonization started and the conquest by the West Europe. And so this part of the world had overlords which were really, interested in the very, very agricultural fertile land. And so during even the creation of the Soviet Union, Ukraine was like a boon and a curse at the same time. Because if you have a fertile black soil, it helps you. Yes, it's a fertile land and there will be always enough food. But at the same time, it's a curse because there will be a lot of fighting over that resource. So, like the resource trap, it is called, it is called resource trap, which partly in its history, Ukraine has suffered a lot, which we are going to also discuss. Now, this concept of, that Ukraine was created by Lenin is a very recent statement by President Vladimir Putin, which leads us again to why is Lenin creating? No, Lenin didn't create Ukraine, but Lenin was very much interested in including the territory of Ukraine within the Soviet Union, without which Soviet Union will not become Soviet Union. That is the basic motive behind. It is not that the Ukrainian statehood was created. Much before that, the Ukrainian People's Republic was there. This was created and this has an existence of 3 to 4 years. Therefore, these are the very interesting myths and certain distortions of historical facts which create the myth, which is beyond, and then it becomes unrecognizable. And during those days, it was like the creation of the big Russia, as it is then called Russia, not Rus. So it was like Belarus, Malarus, and Velika Rus. So it was Velika Rus was big Russia, and Malarus was the small Russia, little Russia, which was Ukraine, and Belarus was the Belarus, as we know, which is the white Russia. So these were the three that constituted the heart of the kingdom, the Russian Empire. So therefore, this Malorussia, some historians say that the word Malorussia, on the other hand, has another meaning, which is not little Russia. Malo is sometimes meaning the central. Like when we say Delhi and Greater Delhi, Kyiv or Greater Kyiv, like to include the suburbs. Any place is called the main. The main place is therefore Malorussia, and the Velikorussia is the greater hinterland. So therefore, that kind of understanding might also be there in this word. But nevertheless, Little Russia or Malorussia is not a very healthy term because it has a very serious imperial connotation. I would like to say also that another very important thing you will hear all the time in the propaganda is that the Ukrainian nationalists are radical and they are it's a fertile ground for neo-Nazism, which is again a very wrong idea because each nation can have some radical nationalists and moderate nationalists. We have had it since the national liberation movements, and we have seen that radical nationalism is one of the part of the patriotic movements. But when, it is branded as neo-Nazism, that is when one nation destroys everyone else, like we have had in the experience of Hitlerite Germany or even fascist Italy during the Second World War. Ukraine never took the land of any other people, and Ukrainians never conquered other lands, and they were never doing this kind of thing. However, you will hear this, and you will hear constantly this denazificatia, which means denazification, being one of the contentions of the Russian propaganda, which led to the full-scale war against Ukraine. That Ukraine is full of neo-Nazi, everyone is a Nazi, and so we have to destroy these neo-Nazi in order to make Ukraine a better place. So therefore, this is another myth that is, it's a slander, it's absolutely not true. And of course, the two historical, very important things that I would like also to mention is you have heard it and you're probably also knowing that these are absolutely not healthy and not, I would say, historically correct. that Ukrainian language is a dialect of the Russian, it has no such existence. Now, that is also not true because we could see that Ukraine has a distinct language, Ukraine has a definite identity. And that when we say that Ukrainians and Russians are one people, this is something that was attempted, when on the basis of religion, it was attempted for the imperial project. And it was attempted in the past, like for cohesive entity, bringing people together. So that was the time. But then religion will not be able to unite different people. You can have Christians all over the world, but that doesn't mean that you would have to include all of them and say they are one people. You can have Christians in, let's say, in Brazil, you have them in Italy, you have them in Germany, you have them in India, you have them everywhere. So religion is something common. It can be a very good basis of friendship, basis of solidarity, but it doesn't mean that all people are the same. Equally, this is the concept of an ethnic concept of a nation. On the other hand, it was a different concept. In Ukraine, it was the political nation that has been there since 1991. Ukraine is inhabited by a lot of different people. So this concept of an ethnocentric concept of the nation was from the very beginning, it had many fault lines. Now, the concept of it becoming a dialect of Russian, this is something that is absolutely wrong. By looking at the literature, by looking at even the poetry of Taras Shevchenko, why was Taras Shevchenko arrested, the national poet of Ukraine, and had to spend years in jail and exile for 10 years in the 19th century? And of course, why there was so many times this language was banned for use in church documents, in everything else. So if it did not have a proper existence, why will it be banned? In order to give supremacy to Russian, of course. And another very important thing is the Holodomor. The Holodomor was famine. Famine, which is something that the Indians know it very well. It was there for time immemorial. We have had, and especially stark are the memories of our ancestors, like the grandmothers and grandfathers who have noticed during the Second World War. And of course, there were a lot of mismanagement and human-made famine. Famine can happen when you have bad harvest, lack of rainfall and other things, but basically it is always, again, you can read the books by the Nobel laureate Amartya Sen, none other, who has made the enormous good research on poverty. So it gets into that big issue that is open, that it is always human made, because even if you have a shortage of crops, you always have a way to stop that starvation. But Holodomor was starvation by, death by starvation, which was a very horrible thing, and it was definitely a genocide. However, the Russian sources and others will say, no, it was not a genocide. It happened because there was a political need of collectivization, and it happened also beyond the territory of Ukraine and other places. But we will definitely see why and how it is really genocide and not just simple artificially created famine. Now, the last but not the least is that Ukraine is a protege of the West and the NATO. Now, let us remember, when all this started in 2014, there was no NATO. Ukraine's constitution had non-bloc independent country. Ukraine had to be beyond all blocs. And it was not at all a protege of the West. It had its borders and it had its independence, sovereign statehood. Now, why is this protege of the West and NATO? Ukraine always wanted to be part of the European family of nations. It was the sovereign choice of getting integrated into the European community, the European Union, in particular the political union that exists. What is so wrong about it? Because the Baltic states are members, Poland is a member, Slovakia is a member, Czechia is a member, Hungary again, and then, of course, Romania, Bulgaria, and also now many of the constituent republics of the former Yugoslavia is also member, it is getting widened. So the issue of Ukraine's striving for being a member of the European Union was something that was absolutely wrongly perceived by Russia. And then it is only after Ukraine's territory was attacked, only after the occupation of Crimea, that the particular aspiration for protection started in Ukraine, the particular aspiration to become a NATO member. There were attention paid to, and there was this membership of NATO was much more needed, and it was really, really pushed for after Ukraine was attacked in 2014 by occupation in Crimea and the hybrid war in Donbass region. Let us remember these. And do you have anyone has any question or any remarks to make? I will then proceed. If everything is okay, I will proceed further. Okay. So the next is I wanted to deal with the language issue. For the introductory lecture, I will not torture all of you for a long time, but we will just see why Ukraine is necessary to be studied and why Ukraine and India need each other. So that's the point I want to make, that I'm making too much of an introduction. The language issue, as I said, there were 60 prohibitions for 337 years. It's not a yesterday's thing. It's not just, yesterday or day before yesterday. So from 1654, it is continuing. It is long before even the birth of Shevchenko, long before it started. And of course, it was, as I told you, I'm not repeating what is written in the slide, that it was first banned by the church use, because church is something through which, Tsarist Russia spread education, official use, and print. And especially terrible was Taras Shevchenko's exemplary, jailing, exile, and prohibited from writing and painting by the Tsar. So that is what, of course, was triggered a very big protest from within. But however, Taras survived. He left us with gems of beautiful poetry, and in no other, in world literature, you will find a poet who was a serf. A serf was someone who was tilling the land. So this rich black soil has also a very painful heritage of serfdom. This territory, especially in Ukraine, the serfs were equated to the cattle. They could be sold like horses and dogs and cats together with the land. So the owner will buy the land together with the people that were cultivating it. So it was a very worse form of serfdom that Taras experienced in his life, and he was an orphan. But from that serfdom, he educated himself. He was an orphan, but life took him to different, and different doors opened, and his talent came out. He was first a painter, then was educated, and then he is a unique poet. We do not have such an example of creation of such poetry of such level by any other, poets in any other language. In fact, we have his parallels who were at that point existing. They acknowledge, and even afterwards, even the Russian literature, Russian experts who are moderates and who are normal experts, they would acknowledge Taras Shevchenko being a great poet. And he was not an imperial poet. That is the difference, Taras Shevchenko's legacy was later used by the Soviet Union, in fact, because he was from the common people, from the lowest, the serf. No poet could rise to that level. Even Pushkin and others, they were from the imperial court. So there was this extreme interesting understanding which the Soviet Union capitalized on it. Even after the death of Taras, Ukrainian language was under pressure. We have the Valuev Order in 1863 and the Ems Order by Alexander II in 1876. So why was it necessary if the Ukrainian language didn't exist? So this is a very valid question. During the Soviet period, as I said, Ukrainian language was a language of the people from which the Soviets could not fully get away. But at the same time, there was a heavy ideological censorship, very serious ideological censorship. And in the 20s, there was a kind of some experiments. And then again, in the 60s, Thor, there we found something. But again, please, I give a quote from one of the very famous historians, Yaroslav Hitsak, who says that in the Soviet Union, it was believed that, communism will speak Russian, because in the ancient times, it was figurative. The expression is that feudalism spoke French and capitalism spoke English. So, so this was the ideological underpinnings of this linguistic policy, which was also another very important aspect. And then today, what we have today, sad reality is that, yes, we have a lot of people, speaking Russian. So the plea that, Russia has to occupy or to attack is that the Russian-speaking population. Now, speaking a language doesn't make the person ethnically belonging to that nation. Like, I also speak Russian, but I'm not a Russian. I speak Ukrainian. I'm not an Ukrainian. So this plea is absolutely lame. Basically, it has no scientific background. Now, another thing is that today, the saddest part of the story is, apart from the terrible torture, the disappearance, the enforced disappearance of people, we have libraries being burned, books are destroyed, and closure of Ukrainian schools. Now, anyone can ask that how much is there are millions of Ukrainians who have been living in Russian Federation. What is happening to the Ukrainian schools over there? What is happening to them? So it's a valid question, which of course the world should ask, what is Russia doing to its minorities or to the different ethnic groups that are living on its territory? The language issue we can speak, in a separate session, but I just gave you certain aspects, which is absolutely clear that Ukrainian is a language with its own merit, it has a beautiful, the structure of the language is different. It is belonging to the Slavic group of languages, definitely, but you can understand like Polish, Slovak, or others, but it is definitely having a very separate identity with a very rich literature, which is absolutely none less than Russian or any other literature. I wanted to talk about the Holodomor. That is another very important aspect, which is that the black soil, as I said, it turned into a curse. And during the Soviet times, as Lenin wanted to have this territory as, as part of Soviet Union. Imagine if Ukraine was an independent country and not part of the Soviet Union. Holodomor would not have happened. Yes, everybody agrees it would never have happened. It was the breadbasket of Europe. Yes, it suffered through the serfdom. There were very rich landlords. And even sometimes, the landlords were living in the cities and the rural peasants were just working hard. When the serfdom was abolished, slowly, this became a very, very rich, and the average middle farmers were the middle class. The class of the peasantry was very important for national awareness, because this is the way the rural-based Ukrainian language had a very serious rural base, and it had a very serious folk and ethnographic entity. So by tapping on the resources of the middle farmers, by attempting to collectivize the big, these small land holdings into big collective farms, which was the collectivization policy of Stalin, and that led to terrible famine. I would definitely say that there were a lot of times this famine happened. It happened during the pre-October Revolution. It happened because Tsarist Russia had famine on its territory during the 1921, because it was past First World War. And then, of course, First World War also saw that there was a big, strife over these fertile lands. And later on, in between the war years, that is the most memorable is the 1932-33, which everyone remembers more. Again, it happened after the Second World War. There was another famine. I'm not going into all these famines, but the basic one that everyone commemorates was that which focused on liquidating a class by using the plea of collectivization. And this collectivization led to requisition or taking away all the grains, and the land was, the famine's impact was widespread. And we have almost, the estimates are 3.5 to 5 million. It is one estimate. Another estimate is from 7 to 10 million people died just out of starvation. And the picture here you see is the monument to Holodomor, which is like a candle in the shape of a candle, and an image of a little girl emaciated by starvation, a thin young girl who is holding in her hands, it is the three sheets, the three koloski, which was one of the things that she's taking a sheaf of little head of wheat and she's holding in her hand. And in front of her, there are these lamps that are always lit. And of course, she's standing on a grinding stone, on the stone that wheat is processed to make flour. So the bread basket suffered from this terrible impact. And I would say that today, this is a real cause, even from the year 2004, 2005, since the onset of this century, Ukraine has been reminiscing, Ukraine has been historically trying to find out, and there is, in this museum, you will find a lot of records of church books, of books of, list of people who died. So sometimes the church maintains the register of people in the villages. So from those books and from other documents, it is seen that how many people died, how many people, they were like like shops which were taking out gold. And even in fact, to speak of Holodomor is another big chapter, which is a very sad chapter. But to look into the Holodomor research is again a very, very serious thing. It has its economic impact. The political impact was that the class of peasantry was removed. And as a result, there was a proletarization, like people had to go, whoever survived, they were totally, they had to go and work in the collective farms or, go and join the factories. And so it was a very different, scenario that happened in Ukraine in the middle of the past century. Even then, Ukraine contributed a lot to the fight against fascism because Ukraine was one of the primary, Ukrainians were at the top of those people who were fighting Hitler's, army. And it led to even liberation, which the Russians say that they have liberated. A big part of them were Ukrainians and Belarusians. And due to that, both Ukraine and Belarus, they were separately indicated as founders of the United Nations. Now that I'm coming to it later, but that this Holodomor is a genocide is not recognized by many countries because they think that this was an economic phenomenon. It had nothing to do with politics. It is something that happened by the way of it. It's not intentional. So that is something that is, debatable. And I would say that, yes, the impact was genocidal. Like today, the impact is genocidal, the war. Whatever plea is used, this is genocidal because the definition of genocide, in fact, the concept of genocide was also developed by two scientists who were residing in Lviv. And it was generated from Lviv University, and then Raphael Lemkin. Turning back our attention to Holodomor, this is recognized by 22 countries and the European Parliament. By this time might be more, but 25 countries joined in 2003. Since 2003, Ukraine has been pointing out to the world, and more countries have adopted resolutions in its favor. I think Japan was the last country, if I'm not mistaken, that also, supported. Now, the reasons I have already said, so this was the national awareness was gone. That is one of the things that breaking the sort of the spine of the national awareness, the national movement, the awakening of Ukraine. That was succeeded by, that was made some partly successful through this policy of Holodomor, which is again a very, very nasty, very, very disturbing event that is so shameful that it happened in a place which fed the whole of Europe. This map will just show you how much it affected. You can see this left part, the Volyn Rivne, they were not part of Ukraine. They were part of the the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but all the other parts, you can see the parts that were affected were the central and the eastern parts, partly the southern parts, but mainly it is these regions, Kiev, Cherkasy, Kirovograd, and all these other places, the Dnieper Basin, basically the majority of the Dnieper Basin, which was Donetsk was less affected because it was more industrial, but Luhansk was a rich farmland. And we had the Kharkiv and these places. The Chernihiv, Sumy steppes, they are coming to the northern forests and steppe lands, so that was less affected. And the death toll is here. In this map, you can see the death toll that happened. And I would tell you now, we will move on to something, but I would again ask anyone has questions to ask, but I would take questions maybe later. Now, a very difficult and again a very difficult topic, colony. Was Ukraine a colony? Because today we talk about Ukraine's post-coloniality, or in simple terms, decolonization. The decolonization is a process that has started long ago. Sometimes countries do not even recognize that it is happening, sometimes it's like something growing. So the growing awareness, Ukraine was not a traditional colony. We have seen how traditional colonies existed, the metropolis and the colony. So we have had these issues. I would draw your attention to the person who's asking to enter, called Oleg. Anyone knowing this person, maybe that person will be telephoning or writing on chat, but otherwise I would request Mr. Volodymyr, maybe please don't, I never like to stop people from entering, but we share the Zoom link with everyone openly. So perhaps that was our mistake, but next time we will make a registration. But if that person is trying to enter, I don't know, I'm not writing anything, so I believe that it is not necessary. Maybe I would even remove if you don't mind, yeah? Okay, so because mostly they write to our email or something, if they cannot access, usually people are writing. So therefore, I'm sorry, we had to remove someone who will be creating some problems. Now, the post-coloniality is, yes, India is a post-colonial. Absolutely, it's classical colony. It is something that, 1947, the power is transferred from Great Britain, and it is all the ceremonial aspects were fulfilled. Then the constitution is drawn. It becomes a republic from the dominion status, and it is an independent country. The same way the African decolonization starts in in the 60s, and we have enough number of colonies coming in, and then they are just, the whole world is turning into Latin American decolonization started long back, the independence wars that were fought. Sometimes they were independence wars that were fought and won. Sometimes it was a peaceful transfer of power. Sometimes it was, an agreed transfer of power, like for Algeria, it was different. It was a warfare that happened. So different ways. Now, the Ukraine is not a traditional colony because number one is Ukraine is rich in resources, of course, because of its resources it was territorially proximate. The proximity of the territory, number one. Number two, cultural proximity also was there. And the difference between the subaltern dominant cultures are very different in the case of Ukraine. And they were like, racially, they may be the same even, because this is the Slavic. Peoples were the Slavic, but they were culturally and linguistically very different, and they had their identity. The identity was not, individual. The marginalization was very collective. It was like they were marginalized. Like the Ukrainian language, as I referred to, that it was a language to, you will not have a high career in the Soviet times if you only know Ukrainian. You had to know Russian in order to be successful in career. And it was more like, as you know, it was professed all over the republics. It was not only in Ukraine. Now, the linguistic cultural assimilation is what Ukraine suffered from through the pressure on language, pressure on different other elements. And of course, the class aspect of, removing the peasant class, removing the class that carried the values of, the soil of Ukraine, which was also another component. Thus, Golodomor becoming an element in rendering Ukraine's post-coloniality, I will say. Now, Russia's role is mystified. Sometimes, you will come across literature, if you go into research, you will come across literature which will be which always shows that it is sometimes like Russians came, they are like the spirit, they are higher spiritually. You will always see a lot of literature, like this is Ukraine, these are Ukrainians. Ukrainians are something, the imperial narrative will always have a looking down upon, that kind of thing. And there is this rhetoric, which is a very racist rhetoric, the white man's burden, which was used by the colonizers to colonize the countries of the global south. And the white man's burden was something that we have to bring the light of civilization to these places. That was how it was professed, which was absolutely, sometimes by professing through spreading of Christianity, through spreading of schools and different other methods. But it was not a very binary. It was not so straightforward. It was a mixture. It was a much more complicated and nuanced, and it had many layers. So the more you study, the more layers opens, and it is a fascinating journey to discover how these different strata of how the depths of colonization took place in different parts of the world. And in fact, this is a modern view. It is very new. It is not well studied and well researched. This is very under-researched, which is a very dangerous thing also, because by making very speedy conclusions, you can arrive at wrong conclusions sometimes. So you must be very careful while you are researching on Ukraine's post-coloniality, is not just to jump into conclusions, but to study it carefully. Now, in general, I'm just mentioning the three main points. Is the imperial narrative was always like, this is not the language you can speak in the church. This is not the language you can learn. Like, this is a rural language, a language of the peasants or the people, sort of like that. But afterwards, of course, you find that this is very different. The identity was subverted that way. And that is how most of the colonial world even suffers this, the notion of the subalterns. In India, we have the Adivasis, we have the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, we have the languages, and so many languages have been lost. There are languages of the indigenous languages in Africa, in Latin America, which are not having the status of the official languages again. But, the issue of colonialism is a very different one. It can sometimes happen that one language dominates over the others. Like, for example, the Han dialect of the Chinese dominates over all other languages. In China, there were many nationalities, but almost 95% will say that it is the Han dialect that is used. Now, that is a very different territory we are entering into. But Ukraine's post-coloniality is that the Russians were always treating themselves, Ukraine, as a downward, as an entity which, you can just look down upon. Now, colonial Ukraine was marginalized, as I said, a little Russia, and it has less intellectual strength. I would say that the politics of imperialism was like this, let it be in the rural areas, like when you have it was imperial Russia, but this is Ukraine, so we have these little songs and dances of these in the Malorossiyski dialect, as they will say, in the Little Russian dialect. They would not even say the Ukrainian language. So that was the way 19th century looked at, and we had these like the very ambivalent portrayal. So as if the aesthetics, the spirit of it is we are trying to look at it and honor it. Oh, how beautiful it is, how nice it is. But it is something to be appreciated, but it is not going to get the national status. It's not the sum total of the national awareness. So it is there like a piece of museum article or something like that. So these are the sources of, and I would say that a lot of others are also there. So later, when during the late 19th century and beginning of the 20th century, especially during the Soviet times, the Ukrainian national awareness was not just the imperial czar looked at it from the rural, the local, the marginal, that the imperial courts had a different language and different style. But this was something that this is the Ukrainian bourgeois nationalism, which also included the urban Ukrainian intelligentsia, the part of those Ukrainians who migrated to the cities and who were belonging to the elites, so were not supporting the Soviets. So they were branded as the Ukrainian bourgeois nationalism, which was a very terrible offense, by the way, and many people spent their lives in jail due to that. And it was a cause to arrest people and send them to Siberia. Now, later, again, some decades later, this radical nationalism is another rhetoric that is appearing. So, and there you find these, they will use the word Banderites. This is from the Stepan Bandera, but I would say we are making it a hype because, long before Bandera, we had leaders who are also held in high esteem by Ukrainians. For example, we had Mazepa. Mazepa, he wanted the Ukrainian independence, but maybe he wanted also power for himself. Mazepa was a hetman ruler of the 17th century. So 17th century, it was long before even Shevchenko. So it long before that. So we had Mazepa who aligned with the Swedes and fought the Russians. We had then Petlura. Petlura was the leader who, during the coming of the Soviet. Yes? Anyone asking a question? Okay. So I just heard somebody speaking something or. Okay, no. So I'm sorry because I'm always panicky over someone again saying something or, okay, sorry. If we go into the question of statehood as it comes, but before that, let me explain that I would not draw a brisk parallel between Netaji Subhash Bose, Indians will understand, and Stepan Bandera, but both of them had only one similarity. Both of them thought that enemy's enemy is my friend. So the attempt of Stepan Bandera to fight the Soviets and to make Ukraine an independent was very much similar to what Subhash Bose tried by going to Germany, hiding from the British and escaping from the house arrest. And that time he was helped, by the way, by the Soviets. And Soviets and Germans had a pact. If you remember the Second World War, before it started, Germany and Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union were friends, and they had a non-aggression pact of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. So, and so then Stalin transfers him to Hitler. Hitler doesn't really want to help because Hitler had other plans, and Netaji Subhash Bose says that, help me free India from the British. But then after spending 2 or 3 years, there was even an Indian legion that fought within the, in the German, there was an Indian legion, and there are a lot of stories. We will be able to, Indians, it. So part of the Indian freedom movement, which was armed struggle, led by Netaji Subhash Bose, using the enemy's enemy, my friend principle, was very much similar to that of the Bandera people. Now, Bandera was, of course, assassinated later, and to the surprise of it, Subhash Bose was not imprisoned by Hitler, but Bandera was imprisoned because soon Hitler realized that he wants a freedom for his own people, and it will not contribute to the expansion of the Reich, expansion of Germany as he wants. So he was put into prison. And of course, after that, he was living in Munich, and then he was assassinated by a KGB agent. Because he was a dangerous person, and he was taken to be, even today, if you hear like the Banderites, the Banderivtsi, as Russians will say. So this was one of the things that happened. Netaji Subhash Bose had a very different reception in India, because what happened was he was taken to Japan, and Japan helped him create the Indian National Army. And the Indian National Army entered Malay entered Singapore and entered India from the northeast and trying to liberate, but they were defeated by the British Indian Army. So there was the British Indians fighting the Subhash Bose Indian National Army. And a lot of their generals were arrested. And the interesting point is that Indian reception was very different because Netaji Subhash Bose's role was very important in triggering the final getting of independence, because Netaji himself escapes, and he is, some people will say that he was shot at a plane accident, it crashed, and some others believe that he was taken to Siberia and held hostage over there for several years. Nobody knows what finally happened to him, but there are different versions. Like, sometimes, Netaji is compared to the fate of Raoul Wallenberg, which, the Swedish diplomat. But he was killed, of course, in Siberia. But what happened to Netaji Subhash Bose, finally, it is not known, but today it is an acknowledged fact. Some people say that there was one ascet saint who came to India, and he was in the guise of Saint Gumnami Baba, who was the Netaji and all other things. But however, the main point is that this armed struggle and non-violence were complementing each other in the broader concept of Indian freedom struggle. But in the sense of Ukraine, it was no struggle because Bandera was assassinated, it was Soviet Union, and the question of Ukrainian independence was dead. There was nothing until 1991. So the post-coloniality of Ukraine had a very different journey and a different road, even though you can find some similar personalities, similar incidents, but you cannot analyze it in that sense that it is all a same, a carbon copy of something. No. And of course, the question of the political nation that I said, is also another thing, that the political nation is always questioned, even not only Ukrainian, but Crimean Tatars and other minorities. They were brutally persecuted and systematically. These arrests and deportations happened, and today they are happening in the occupied territories of Crimea and the other part of Ukraine, which is occupied by Russia. One of the things that I would say is this white man's burden. You remember that, we are more powerful, so we must be the leading. And these are colony because these are weaker people. Now, this is a concept that is a very interesting thing about colonial policy. Now, there is one very famous social scientist, Mykola Repchuk. It's one of my favorite social scientists who research extensively on these issues. And he mentions in one of his articles, which I found fascinating, is, you have read Robinson Crusoe, I believe, This is the attitude of the Russian is the Robinson Crusoe and the Ukrainian is the Friday. Without the Friday, Crusoe would not be able to be Crusoe. Yes, but it is not recognized. It is someone who is just the Friday. So Ukrainians were everywhere there. In the Soviet Union, even a lot of the technical intelligentsia, the scientists and the people who developed a lot of projects and made great discoveries, there were many of them were Ukrainians. Yes, and today many will say that, well, in the Soviet leadership there were Ukrainian people. Of course, yes. But again, there is this subduing of that Ukraine. In this sense, there is this psychological aspect, which I would say that this cannot be ignored, at least. We should take this into account. And therefore, Ukrainians will not be able to fight Russia. It is only because of the West or the NATO they are able to fight. You will hear it all the time. I think, a lot of journalists are repeating it, even without even blindly repeating, copy-pasting information, copy-pasting the narrative. So this is also another source of making Ukraine a real post-colonial entity, because the moment you even write or even talk about it, you automatically subscribe to this theory that, yes, Ukraine, you are making Ukraine a colony, nothing else, So be it a colony, you're trying to say that it is a Western colony or it is a Russian colony. So this is that theory of the sphere of influence, you can say in any other word, but it is again referring to that status which is hardly possible to identify in one or the other way. It is not purely economic. It is not purely political. It is a mixture. It's not purely cultural. It's a mixture of all of these things taken together. So I come to a very important point, and I will finish very quickly. That is, after all the myths that we had, I say that there are 9 undeniable truths that come out, that it is a sovereign democratic nation, which we cannot ignore. And we cannot ignore the ancient history of Ukrainian statehood. By even visiting Kiev, by even looking at all the other places in Ukraine, you can get ample proof of it. And of course, the internationally recognized borders since 1991, and then of course, the Budapest Memorandum that was signed. One of the unique things about Ukraine is that it is perhaps the first and the only country which gave up all its nuclear weapons. Yes, I have heard people telling me now, why did you give it up? Now you are begging for weapons from all over the world. Yes, but it was given up to ensure independence, to become a non-bloc entity that is a neutral country, and also under the guarantee that anyone attacking Ukraine, then who will support, who will help? Russia, Britain, and United States, the 3. And then 2 other countries joined this memorandum, China and France. Now, please see who are helping. It's France trying to help, Britain trying to help the United States. China and Russia has been to the other side. So this is the greatest tragedy, we should say, of this, of one of the century, is that this precedence of international law totally being ignored, and international agreements, like pacta sunt servanda is the norm, that all treaties should be fulfilled or implemented, is one of the things that is a very big, very hard truth. It is nothing to hide, but this is undeniable. And of course, it's one of the founding members of the United Nations, and it has not violated a single international agreement. It has not become aggressive or occupied even a centimeter of any other land, Ukraine. And of course, you could see that this is the largest and one of the most powerful armies of the world is the Russian army. But today you can see who is the most powerful army. It's the Ukrainian army. The Ukrainian army has got the power even without having proper weapons. They are sustaining the war for more than 3 years, 3.5 years. And they are Russia is unable to swallow Ukraine. They are unable to do anything militarily. And of course, Ukraine has lost its heroes, its people, its patriots. I have lost a lot of, my friends. I have lost sons of my friends, relatives of my friends, and we get news every other day. Many are missing. So it's a personal tragedy. It's a very sincere, it's a very, very heartbreaking thing that are going on every day. Even last night we spent in the metro station because, we don't know what is coming to us every night, every minute can bring us all kinds of horrors and death. So it is between this life and death survival, which is the test of patriotism of people and defenders of the homeland, that is happening. All the more, even then, the potential of the Ukrainian nation is unimaginable because they have the very big technological potential. They are creating newer types of drones, newer types of things. And even now, the big companies are getting interested in using these technologies, in using these know-how. In the beginning of the war, a 19-year-old started designing a drone, and he made a news, all over the world that, this little kid could do so much. And there were, of course, very funny things that happened that, I would say 2 things. That one grandmother, she saw something flying. It was not a serious drone, those like the ones flying now, but she threw a jar of pickled cucumbers, and something she threw like a piece of stone, and that broke, So people were joking that, with a jar of pickled cucumbers, you can fight when you have nothing else to throw. Recently, a falcon, orel in Ukrainian, a bird, which with its wings, hit some drone, and the drone was, of course, disturbed. And when you disturb a drone, it destroys. It was made, it didn't act. It couldn't fight. The drone fell down. But the bird lost its, the wing was broken. And so this bird, the falcon, was taken by the Ukrainian armed forces, and they were given to the special clinic, special people. They collected money for making a surgery to the bird, and the bird, this excellent, the gallant bird, is now recovering. So it's a very fresh news. I can tell you a lot of war stories, but today's lecture is not about world stories. I want to just introduce Ukraine, and then let me move on to the Ukraine-India relations timeline. This I'm giving you today now, but we will discuss about it in one of the lectures which we discuss Ukraine's foreign policy. That will be a different lecture where we will describe. In general, it was the 91-97 was a very positive development, but 97, Ukraine sold tanks to Pakistan due to what? The 97-2002 was a relatively cold period in relations. And then 2002, President Kuchma visits until 2004 when the Orange Revolution takes place. And 2005, President Abdul Kalam visits Ukraine, and there was a nice development of relations. And then it goes up and down, not so much, but in 2012, President Yanukovych visits India. And after that, the Maidan Revolution happened in 2013 and 19. The relations were like stagnant almost, because India was not very active. It was very hesitating to understand what is happening with the occupation of Crimea, and until it took its position, it did not support the annexation. However, the relations were moving on till 2019, when we had a change in the president here. And of course, Zelensky put a very serious priority on Ukraine-India relations. And then also there were a lot of agreements. However, diplomatic activity continued. A lot of agreements were signed. A lot of cultural, political, economic agreements were signed. A lot of industries, trade boomed. And in fact, until 2002, there was the trade volume was rising. Investments were growing into pharmaceuticals and others, and India-Ukraine relations were thriving. And 2022, of course, due to the war, a lot of this has crushed, because the coming of students was another thing. A lot of students came here to study medicine, more than 20,000 students. But now, of course, their number has receded. And until today, Ukraine is supported by India through humanitarian aid and through other activities by individual Indians like, myself and others. We try to do our best to contribute to these relations. The embassy helps. Like the event we are having today is one of the proof that we are trying to build relations. Okay, so we will discuss about it later. And now we have certain hangover from the past and the policy gaps that happened. So from the part of Ukraine was, it was not very, it was a more focus on Euro-Atlantic integration and less on Global South. Ukraine really did not have a solid policy on Global South, and it was very weak in public and cultural diplomacy, I must say that, and it is developing now, and it started from 2017, and then, it is growing because the Ukrainian Institute was set up, and with every year it is getting. And there was this triangular perception, Ukraine and India, Pakistan, there was the choice of these, trade-off. So this triangular perception we should get rid of from the point of Ukraine. And from the point of India, similarly, we have the Russian influence on our relations. And why should, a third country influence our relations? That has been, my personal perception is a similar triangular perception. India, Russia, Ukraine should be changed, Ukraine should be looked at directly. And Ukraine is not a European headache, by the way. And I wanted to say that this anti-West stance is something that is bothering us, because India is trying to get its free trade agreement with the West, with the European Union, and it is one of the choicest trade partners of India. And as you know, the free trade agreement is being finalized. And so I think that Ukraine becoming a member of the European Union is a great thing for India to be a big trade partner of Ukraine. And there's a big potential of middle powers coming together. So on one hand, if we always look at through the prism of Russia, It is something that is going to really have these hangovers, and this will not be improved. Now, these changed realities, I have been talking about it, and so full agency and representation of Ukraine is in the interests of India, because if whatever, undermining Ukraine will undermine the international setup, international, let's say, policy setup, which makes for countries to be adequately represented and sovereign values like democracy, multilateralism thrive. We are talking of multilateralism, but if we ignore Ukraine and we let China and Russia decide the formation of the world, it will not be a very comfortable reality for Indians, for Indian foreign policy also. So India's alliances really lie in joining hands with many countries in order to fruitfully discover the benefits of multilateralism, which we are talking about for so long. Multilateralism is not an anti-Western stance, which is so far, we have heard in India. Every time you talk about multilateralism, it is always having to do something against the West. I would say no, we need to change the paradigm to joining a number of nations to be really multilateral, to take into account the interests of all countries. So the Global South and Ukraine is another very important, they have a problem understanding Ukraine because it is very Russocentric. Even in the universities, you will see you have centers of Russian studies, centers, you will not see centers of Ukrainian studies. You will not have centers of maybe East European studies sometimes you have, but Ukraine is one of the very fundamental states to be studied under the caption East European Studies. And our institution is named because, we want to research on these aspects, how to position Ukraine as a leading state of East Europe, ideologically, politically, and culturally. And so, how the relations with the Global South can thrive, So the grand bulldozer so far is working, which is the Russian media. And of course, the problems that are existing today, it is very difficult for the Global South to understand Ukraine due to the situation that has ensued. Yeah. So why the dialogue is necessary now and why should it matter? After telling all of these, you see the values that are cherished by Ukraine and the legacies with the Global South. If you think of this spirit of this decolonization, the post-coloniality of Ukraine, and from the periphery, this is somewhere in the periphery of Russia. This is a sphere of influence of Russia. If we move out and bring it to the center, no, there is a focus. And we bring people to people. Here we have students, both from Ukraine and from India. And in the future, if you attend these, you can talk to each other and there will be a peer-to-peer network, which is very important to understand each other without teachers even guiding and telling you this is correct and this is wrong. So yourself to discover, yourself to understand each other better. And that is a better clue for, societies to develop, because states will develop their interstate relations. Yes, government to government relation. There is nothing that can replace them. But people to people relation is more important in understanding these, the nuances of the countries. And not only academically, academically researchers will talk about it, write articles, but even on the plain person's level, important things like tourism, just cultural studies, simple understanding of life is very much possible. And that is possible with the Global South. India as a country of the Global South should be interested. And as we say that it is Ukraine has proved a lot by this time, and the resilience of the people. If you go with me or go with other Ukrainians to the shelter, what will you see? You will see a lady with a stick, a very old lady. You will see a little kid in a pram. You will see dogs, cats, domestic pets in little bags and sacks, staying all quiet, everyone opening their tabs or laptops or reading a book, or someone even doing some needlework, and someone just sleeping, even if it is night, There is not a single sense of shouting at each other or expressing any dismay. There is an amazing level of coalition. I call it a silent coalition, which we realize that we are acting as one, no matter who comes from where. This is a unique feeling that you have, that the resilience of people. If you suffer, you have to quickly, help each other. So anyone is on the street and say, do you know there is an alert? You quickly move to the shelter, please. So, and of course, the military. We could survive because of the greatness of the Ukrainian military and the Ukrainian defense. They have created history. I believe the history books will write and we will study. Our grandchildren, great-grandchildren will study it. And despite lack of weapons, how to fight for your own country. They are not fighting and occupying other countries. They are not telling those things. So it's very important, this respect for freedom. If you respect the freedom of, of other people, you respect your own freedom and liberty and human rights. This is all. And so is it not time for us to think of this alliance of middle powers? And is it not time, therefore, for Indians to rethink and revisit several things of Ukraine, and not think by default, Ukraine is a part of the ex-Soviet Union, and ex-Soviet Union is today Russia. No, ex-Soviet Union is Russia plus 14 other countries, sovereign, independent, and resourceful, and rich countries like even Kazakhstan, which is a very big country, I would say, and also smaller countries, which are extremely strong countries, the Baltic republics, the Baltic three countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, which are members of the European Union, Caucasus, Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, and also the Central Asian, culturally very rich and mineral rich. And they have a lot of history. They have unique history, each of these countries, which were part of the Soviet Union. It is not Russia. If we say that we are experts in Soviet studies and only study Russian literature, I'm sorry to say I will not consider that a good expert of Soviet studies, because Soviet studies is not Russian literature and Russian language. It is much beyond that. So let us remember that, and at least from the point of Ukraine, if we concentrate on Ukrainian studies, let us think of Ukraine and what it can bring to us Indians to enrich our minds. And that's most important. In enriching our minds, Ukraine has a lot to give. Ukraine has a lot to offer because Ukrainians are highly respectful. Many Ukrainians know Hindi. They are fluent in the language. For 30 years, there's a department teaching Hindi to students, but there's not a single university teaching Ukrainian to any Indian, which is a fact of shame, honestly. And of course, there are people knowing Sanskrit also here. There are people trying to learn other languages, and hopefully it will prosper. Ukrainians, once the war is over, those things will start happening. So let us look forward to that and start having a healthy relationship and think that, does Ukraine matter for India or India matters for Ukraine? So with this question I put before you, I want to finish, and here are my coordinates. You may write down my emails and you may write to me. If you want, you can write to our office. What I would do is also to send you a list of literature, some materials, reading materials, and I will look forward to the next lecture, which will take place on the 12th, just 2 days after. We will discuss democracy and society. Basically, we will think of the existing political system after independence, the party system, then the constitution of Ukraine, and then also speak about human rights. And I will have a colleague who will deliver a good lecture on human rights, Ms. Maria Tomak, a very famous human rights expert. She's a journalist by profession and education, and she's also worked at very high levels on as one of the top managers of the Crimea Platform and other organizations. She leads a media initiative for human rights organization today. So we will be able to discuss more on the 12th, the same time. So have you written the email? So if you have, then I will close the presentation. And so now I look forward to your questions. First of all, I look forward to questions from all those who are going through the internship. Yes. Yes, Nazar, please. Happy to see you again. Yeah.
I'd like to ask what Ukraine can give to India economically? Because I think now Indian government see only economical profits and scared from
Yes, I
from
understood. I understood your question. At the end of the day, all relationships between countries are somewhat transactional. Yes, yeah. It is transactional, but at the same time, this economic benefit is there too. It will not happen if you do not have the common political climate. Like you have something common in politics, because otherwise you have only transaction and there ends the issue. So basically, with Russia, despite the rhetoric, there is only the buying and purchasing of weapons and oil. And some little hangover that is going on after the Soviet times, and sometimes now these Russian courses and other things are happening. Other than that, the people-to-people relationship is the key, where we have non-economic elements. Ukraine can offer. Number one, Ukraine can offer, let's say, the basic thing is how many children were educated to be got doctors in Ukraine. Yes, Ukraine can absorb Indian students. That is one of the things, not only in medicine, but in technical disciplines, in many other disciplines. Number one. Number two is that trade. Trade can happen not just in heavy sectors, not just in industrial sectors, and in purchase and sale of weapons technology. That is different. That is a state prerogative, but also in the private sector, like investments, know-hows, and other things, engineering know-how, different technologies. And I know there were people from the metropolitan, like the metro, the underground railway. There were cases in India when India was constructing metro underground, the subways. So there were people from Ukraine going there and helping the engineers with their technology. So there are areas, and I'm sure one of the most important areas is this technological and educational cooperation, not just exchange of students. Exchange is very important, because so Ukrainian students can go to India and Indian students come here. It is not just some people coming, paying, and becoming educated, getting medical degrees. This is not enough. Or it is not enough to just buy and sell things. It is better to get investments, have joint ventures, and have greater integration into the economic exchanges. And of course, that becomes a better reality if you have a membership of the European Union. And that will definitely open the road. And I'm sure that even without that, because of the war, the trade has suffered. And of course, the journey has suffered, and we need to sort out a lot of things, which will, of course, happen. I'm not sure if I answered, because it's not in my or your hands. We have to all do it together. It's a lot of work to be done by different people, and the policy framework needs to be streamlined. And I think that is slowly taking place already. There were a number of agreements that were signed last year when Prime Minister visited Ukraine, Prime Minister of India. And now, at least I know that there should be some work going on for leadership of Ukraine to visit India. So the minister had visited, Mr. Sibiha, Andriy Sibiha has visited this year, and I'm sure Mr. Volodymyr can tell you. He has the secrets, who is visiting, who he is inviting and who he is not inviting. So it's in his hands, so not in my hands. So that is something we can ask him. Okay, thank you. Any questions to me more, please, from the those who are interns, please. Anything else to comment on whatever I said?
Hello, ma'am.
Maybe you don't agree. Maybe something you don't agree. The students, I mean.
Yes, ma'am. Hello, good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yes.
So, ma'am, basically, I have a question.
Mhm.
As part from Ukraine side, how India can mediate between, how India can play as a mediator between Ukraine and the global South. So, if you can elaborate on that.
Well, that is a very interesting question. I haven't heard it in that connotation as you put it. I have seen it how India can mediate between Russia and Ukraine. A lot of people have been talking about it. Yes, and even President Zelensky once even said that, India is well positioned to mediate. However, India didn't want to be that mediator, but India conveyed its message separately to Mr. Putin and to Mr. Zelensky. Prime Minister Modi did it to the best of his ability, as he could. So now we have to understand, mediate between who? Russia and Ukraine? Or you are mentioning mediate between global South and Ukraine? If it is global South and Ukraine, yes, there are a lot of opportunities. Number one is India has to position itself as the leader of the global South. However, there is a problem. If you look at the last declaration of the BRICS, you will see that there has been a statement, undermining Ukraine, but not undermining Russia, which has been a very big, I would say, Achilles' heel, because when they have undermined that some train accident in Bryansk and all this, they were acts of terrorism, blaming the Ukrainians. It was the Russian side. But for the 3.5 years, I would say rivers of blood has flown. Every day people are dying and every day children are getting killed. Hundreds and thousands are getting kidnapped. So not a word about those terrorisms, not a word. And also India got a problem here because we got not the Pulwama, but Pahalgaon terrorist attack was also condemned in that resolution, which was passed just day before yesterday. But the name of Pakistan was not mentioned. India wanted it to mention that this was a cross-border terrorism which was orchestrated by Pakistan, which was not mentioned. So you have to understand that there is it is not really so easy to stand between global South and Ukraine, because global South is a huge block of nations which might not always listen to India, because there are fronts which are being sort of like, we have to bear this in mind. Yeah, we have a huge number of countries that are in our favor, but at the same time, if you look at this from this point of view, like the alliance that Pakistan is building parallelly with other countries, number one. Number two, Pakistan is building alliances with different countries, but the countries of the global South, which are more aligned to China and Russia. This is also another factor you have to bring into it. And so when you have Taliban being accepted and the first embassy they are opening in Moscow. So the rationale behind it is very, very simple, that it wants to have an axis of powers which will help Russia to sort of like get an access to that region, because it is understood that, the Central Asian region needs to be controlled, and, accepting Taliban as one of even no country has diplomatic relations with that country. So isn't this a very important signal? How can this be an issue between global South and Ukraine? Well, no. Indirectly, yes, and directly, no. But for example, if we have the IPSA, like India, Brazil, South Africa, like not China and not the BRICS, but the IPSA, the IPSA, the South Africa, Brazil, India, and the other groups they can have a lot of things to say, common things like in climate change, they have a policy. Not always, because China and India, they have a separate policy on climate change on policy levels. But Ukraine and Global South, in understanding of Global South by Ukraine will do it on its own. But India can help by itself understanding Ukraine better, and by being proactive in certain policies. Then Ukraine can be sort of relying on India to be a proper channel of communication. That is possible. That is possible because India has a very good network of allies, and those allies can be. But India first needs to also build its relations with Ukraine before being a mediator between Global South and Ukraine. I don't know if I've answered your question. Okay, so the next, someone wrote in the chat, what diplomatic means or tools India to engage more actively with Ukraine without triggering friction with Russia or BRICS partners? Well, there are more, because if you do not have friction or with Russia or BRICS, but at the same time, there is a point, like, at some point you cannot just, ignore this warfare, like if a country similarly says that, we want to have relations both with India and with Pakistan without engaging into it, it's somewhat it sounds like that, BRICS partners and India, they are autonomously acting, Ukraine is not, not a factor involved over there at all, and so there is no frictions with Russia. But whenever, when you have a country which is becoming directly aggressive and killing its people for years and months, so that country has its sovereign interest, and that country has its legitimate interest to seek similar support and political support, diplomatic support from other countries. So the diplomatic means cannot exclude things like that there should be some red lines. Now, it is for us to draw the red lines. One of the red lines is that we will not buy weapons from Russia. After the aggression, no defense contracts were signed. But now, I know that there are proposals. Russia is proposing some fighter jets and some other things. So who knows what will happen? So enhanced defense cooperation rather with Russia will be a problem, And it will not have a very, in general, in Ukraine, there are questioning perspectives because Ukraine expected India to be more active. It did not, So, in fact, despite all that has happened, the purchase of oil and other things, everything was watered down. Ukrainians somehow accepted it. But at the same time, this weapons purchase and defense collaboration, like if India supports Russia with weapons or with details of parts, that is going to be terrible because, what China has done or Iran has done, that will not contribute to any progress in relationship. That is a problem. We have to draw the red lines. We can maintain relations, but we have to draw the red lines. Well, because of your aggression to Ukraine, we cannot do A, B, C, D with you. That's very simple. If you agree with me, I don't know, but I think that there are red lines that could be drawn with each and every country. Yes, anyone else? Anything? Well, everyone is silent, so maybe I will just. Okay, so for the for the Ukrainian participants, I'm sorry because a lot of things were repetitive, a lot of things for the Ukrainian students, I would like anything you want to add, because I'm sure you know even some things more than I do. So you want to add anything? Any experts wants to add anything? Ukrainian, please. If you want, please. Yes. Please.
Hello, dear Professor Gosh. Thank you very much for this powerful and timely lecture. I just want to express my truly grateful because your lecture is very deeply informative and I could say incredibly moving. And you really made efforts in our Ukraine's ongoing fight for freedom and dignity, and it's very important to do such enlightenment activity. So that's why for me it's my honor to be here at this lecture, and I wish that more audience from India, more young people have opportunity to come on such kind of event and just to get knowledge from this truly resources, because unfortunately there are a lot of propaganda things all around the world until continue is working.
Yes.
Like meet like that Ukrainian language is dialect. Even I'm listening recently somewhere in US, so that's why it is a very, very hard work and very important. So I just want to thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your remarks, for your kind appreciation. I really also like it. Now, in one of the future ones, if today there is a warm-up kind of thing happening, people are silent, but in one of the future ones, please, if you may send us the emails of yours or write in the chat so that we can, communicate with you. We want to have a peer-to-peer discussion between students. I'm ready to moderate it, but we will choose certain topics. Possible topics are what to do between Ukraine and India, how to enhance the collaboration. If we have a discussion between students, do you accept that to be a nice thing to do? For students to come and discuss the peer-to-peer discussions? Yes? So if you don't mind, just write your emails, whoever, want to participate in it. So please write in the chat. We will just communicate with you. And of course, sending you all the materials and to read and the Nazar Hechka. Okay. So write your name and email, because email is okay. But if you have, okay, Nazar Hechka, we have the name. So we will have it now. Then only one person. So rest of you, please, I will then contact through your, we can have a peer-to-peer discussion. Is that what we are trying to model? Is that we will have this series of lectures, and then we have a good discussion. We can write short papers, and we will be awarding certificates to everyone who participates. So this is the idea. And so please join us, whoever wants to, yes, please. Okay, so the interns of the embassy, the 5 interns who are there, your emails, yes. So please give me these emails here who wants to participate, and we can have a discussion. Of course, the discussion will be in English. We cannot have it in Hindi or in Ukrainian because, we are not so like, we are not that pliant linguistically. So we will have in English, the discussions. No matter, English is not the native language neither for Ukrainians nor for all Indians, but, we happen to know this will be the common one. Okay, so yes, Miss Yanina Tchaikivska, we will take down your number and we will communicate with the topics and the date. So, but the next one, the next lecture will be on the 12th. And we will put it on the website and on our Facebook page. But at the same time, I will open a registration form, because we will otherwise have the situation that we had today. People coming in and, trying to disturb, and we had to do the waiting room. Okay, so we will ask you to register before you come, or we will have the waiting room system. Yeah. Okay. I'm very happy to see those people who I know. Alexandra Temchenko, I'm just so happy to see you here. I hope to see you soon, and we have to think of many things to discuss, good things. And Dubov Mazurchak, I see you. So those who I know, Victoria Kushmid, yeah, I'm very happy. So please keep in touch, all of you. And 12th, we will have the discussion on human rights. It will be a marvelous discussion. Please join us. Please join us. You will not miss. We will have a lot of fun. So please, 12th, we will have it same time. So all of you are welcome. And also bring people along who are interested in, talking about human rights in Ukraine. It's a territory, human rights is synonymous to the existence of Ukraine. It's an existential struggle. So I thank Vivek, I thank Anand, all of you are most welcome. Deepak, I thank, so all of you. Arnab, Kiev, I thank, to all my Indian friends. And, I'm very, very happy that you're all here. So we will meet on 12th. Mr. Volodymyr, the word is off to you now for concluding the meeting, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gvosh. It was insightful as always, and I feel myself enlightened, so I'm sure that at least our interns in the embassy are definitely also enlightened. We are very much grateful for this great opportunity and looking forward for the second lecture on the 12th. I wish all the participants to have a good day, and we wish you as much as it possible a good day in Kyiv and in Ukraine. Thank you so much.
Let's hope. Let's hope. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you,
I
Mrudula.
hope
Thank you so much.
everyone, yeah. Thank you, Arnabji. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
On the
Thank you.
12th, we will discuss many other things. Okay, so I was very nervous today because of these disturbances.